everyday people, they don't understand technology, right? So they can only feel, oh, if the cost gets cheaper, if this introduce like a new user experience, then people can feel, oh, crypto is changing the world. Why I'm getting like a much cheaper Uber because of ABC or crypto underneath. Same applies to transportation, to data, to tech, to to energy, to something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And completely agree that it has the ability to change the world. Raullen Chai, welcome to the What Kind of Internet Do You Want podcast. Thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here too, Amy. Very nice to meet you.
So, before we get started, if you could give us a brief introduction about who you are and why you work in Web3.
Yeah, for sure. I have a very interesting story. I was doing my PhD in cryptography in U Waterloo in the year from 2008 to 2011. That's where I got into Bitcoin because Bitcoin white paper actually came out around 2008 year end ish, right? So that's why it's very natural for me to dive into the Bitcoin system because it's something like too good to be true to me, not just to me, all the peers, advisors at that time as well. Everyone wants to kill Bitcoin at an early stage, right? But we all failed. Then we all become like a fan of Bitcoin at that time. So I'm also a very early like a community member for Bitcoin in Canada as well. So that's where I got into crypto very early.
Oh,
And
wow. Interesting.
yeah. And after my graduation, right? So around the year of 2011, 2012, so crypto is not an industry. Coinbase is still like a three people company, right? At that time, it was a huge company. Um, so, no much option for me. I joined Google, stayed there for 5 years, leading teams, doing a lot of infra security, distributed computing, storage systems, while still kind of very engaged with the blockchain. Ethereum was also born at that time too, very engaged with crypto on the side, basically. Then after Google, I joined Uber for 1 more year, basically at a hyper growth stage, leading the entire cryptography. That's basically my background and interest, right? Work over there in Uber. So yeah, I think by the year end of 2017, crypto, blockchain, everything becomes more mature. A lot of people, capital, kind of
Mhm.
like looking into this one very seriously. So that's where I think, okay, I cannot stop, guys, right? So I have to jump into this revolution. So that's why me, two co-founders, we started IoTex in the year end of 2017.
Well, I think it's great to have a founder like you in the space who has such a robust background in technology, both working with cryptography, Google, Uber. So, how would you explain IoTex and WebStream to a non-technical person? Just like the basic details about your project.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Everybody knows Uber, right? So everybody knows the Airbnb, but like there is a way to build like a Web3 version or crypto version of Uber, Airbnb, and we are actually like enabling infrastructure or platform for application like this. So this is like my elevator pitch to investors.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's something actually that I've been thinking about for a really long time as well. We've been in, the Web3 infrastructure space since 2014 or so, and there wasn't a lot of people working on Web3 infrastructure at that time or thinking about the ways that blockchain technology could be used for Web3 infrastructure. But now there's a lot of it, and so I wonder, give us now some more of the technical details that the nerds will appreciate for how you're able to actually accomplish that.
So basically, dealing with real world stuff like a Uber in real world, right, in a crypto fashion, is not easy. So roughly, you need like a two parts. So one is like on-chain parts, right? That's why we have kind of like a layer one EVM compatible blockchain we built ground up from the year, from 2017 to 2019, which has been launched in production for almost 4 or 5 years, running pretty smoothly. We never got down, right? So because it's running by the community, a few hundred nodes around the world. Pretty good, pretty proud of that part. But most importantly, for dealing with real world stuff, is off-chain part, right? So because you're dealing with a lot of, let's say, sensors, weather stations, cars, TVs, people, cell phones, whatever. So they're producing a lot of data every second, right? 1 million of devices sending data to somewhere. So that's kind of like a somewhere we're building. So this is called WebStream. That's another protocol. It's like an off-chain compute protocol. We're also building from the year 2021 until now. So any by combining those two things, like entire system could work, right? So taking Uber for example, is let's say someone come here, they want to build like a Web3 Uber. Usually they cannot build like all the text layers from ground up because huge amount of work, right? Unless you raise like, I don't know, maybe $50 million, you have a team of 100 people, you can do that. But usually it's not the case. Um, Especially at the early stage, you want to show your investors, oh, this Web3 Uber is a valid idea. You don't have the fortune to, raise that amount of money. So that's why, we gave them the tool, the platform, the infrastructure, so they can quickly, kind of experiment the idea within a few days, maybe a few weeks at most, right? So they can go to market, get feedback. If everything works, that works. That's kind of like an idea. Also, this is for us to build, um, some crypto stuff that really making a really good positive impact to the real world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that the ideas of what's happening on chain versus what's happening off chain are really important. So I'm curious though about how the security works, right? So the things that are happening off chain, are they happening in trusted execution environments so that the data is somehow being signed by something? Like how do you know that the data that you're then putting on chain is accurate?
Yeah, that's very true. It's a very good question. So for this end-to-end security, from a device on the car or maybe in pocket, all the way to the smart contract, the security, this end-to-end security is hard to be honest, right? The on-chain security is like a relatively easy. Everybody knows how to do that. But the off-chain security basically coming from two parts. So part one is the source of the data. That's usually coming from devices. Could be your phone, could be some specific devices, a Wi-Fi hotspot as well. For that part, unfortunately, I think the best human technology we have right now to enforce security is something called like a TEE, Trusted Execution Environment, or security element. That's kind of like a mini version of TEE as well. So those are the very kind of hardcore, like enclave hardware modules that can be mounted into a device. So every time when the device collects the data or producing a data, the data gets signed. So I think so far that's the best way we can do to guarantee the data authenticity on the device side.
So, are
Then,
you guys manufacturing hardware as part of your work, or are you working with manufacturers?
no, we're not doing hardware, but we do have like hardware SDK. So basically, we can give this
Okay,
SDK to some Raspberry Pi hardware developers, so they can easily, having this one to build out like a device that works with the system we have.
gotcha. Makes sense.
So this is part one of the security, right? Part two is when the data leave in the device, going to the off-chain middleware, before they get onto the chain. So this kind of off-chain compute is the second part, second stop of data, basically. We want to enforce the security integrity here in a decentralized way, in a trustless way, basically. So that's where zero knowledge proof actually kicks in, right? I'm like my background is cryptography, so I know how the thing works, and I'm a huge believer in ZK technology as well. So principally, we have the data. We will have like this like a Uber builder to write a circuit deployed to our off-chain compute stack. So when the data actually comes, it triggers a computation in the off-chain, which produce a concise proof, can send to the chain. Basically says, oh, this car has taken maybe this passenger from A to B. That's why like a 10 tokens should be paid to the driver. So the proof itself is concise enough, so that's can be processed by the blockchain seamlessly.
Okay, that makes sense. I love that. So, then what is the incentive mechanism? Is that part of your model? Like when the data is then sent to the blockchain and the user is paid those tokens, how is that decided? How those tokens are paid, how much they're paid, all of those kind of questions.
Yeah, I think that's really like up to the application developer, right? Like this Uber builder, who designed the entire token ecosystem for his part, and we are in charge of like the token for the underlying kind of like infrastructure part. That means like IoTex layer one as well as this off-chain compute middleware, which is called WebStream, by the way.
Got it. And so does the consensus mechanism itself pay any tokens for providing the data?
No, not like tokens are not directly incentivized for people to submitting their data, right? We're more like a AWS or GCP, while those Ubers or like a Spotify or maybe YouTube are actually running on top of us. That
Okay.
means like as a YouTube user, you don't give your data to AWS or GCP, right? Directly, but
Mhm.
maybe give your data to YouTube in a way.
Brilliant. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay, so I listened to the talk that you did with Jake Bruckman recently at what was it? The Singapore Token Conference.
yeah.
And one of the things you guys talked about was the need for composability for developer, right? And especially in the DePIN space. You talked about that in terms of the decentralized verification layer, the financialization layer. You talked about abstracting complexity away from the hardware. And so I'm wondering what, if anything, you guys are doing in terms of providing composability to the DePIN space, and also if there are other areas that you think other builders should be thinking about to provide that composability.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love to talk about, right? Like I mentioned about, there are very few kind of lucky projects they can raise a lot of money. Like a Helium was one of them. I think Helium did a good job in terms of like a LoRa, maybe 5G right now. So they have the team to build like from hardware to this middleware connectivity all the way to blockchain. They used to have a blockchain, but they moved to Solana recently. Blockchain application, phone app, so on and so forth, right? It's like a 7 or 8 components kind of stack up. Not everybody can do that, for sure. So like my thesis is still crypto blockchain is a field that is like a full of experiments, right? So there are a lot of solo developers, maybe like or maybe very smaller teams, 2 or 3 people, maybe 5 people. They want to change the world. So this is very different from Google, Facebook, or Uber, or like Waymo, right, type of company. They usually have like hundreds, thousands of people, even more. So that's why like composability is very, very important. You want to use this one kind of like consolidate all the resources, intelligence, capital, skills, everything all together globally, right? Maybe you're working with someone who's on the other side of the world. That's kind of like a ethos of crypto. So I think a DePIN is not an exception here. Yeah, by the way, DePIN means decentralized physical infra networks. It's just like an acronym for like Web3 Uber, Web3 Spotify type of things I was talking about earlier. Okay, so with this as our kind of fundamental thesis, so we are thinking about how we can chop out the entire like a monolithic tech stack into some smaller like modules. We're not necessary to do all, but like we want to kind of give a map out everything, every component here. So other builders can kind of kick in to build, and we're building part of this one. So yeah, so for us, I think the most important one for us for now is like off-chain compute and layer one chain. And recently, we got some kind of interest for DePIN projects, smaller ones, especially saying, "Oh, can we have kind of consolidated like a map of DePIN devices for all the DePIN projects? Basically show people how crypto is changing the world." That's why we also launched like a DePINscan.com recently, which is getting a lot of like traffic or feedback. It's another kind of like a product, smaller product we're building on the side as well.
DePIN scan is awesome. I was going to ask you about that. The map is just really, it's so exciting to see how much use DePIN is getting. I think it's kind of like the best kept secret in crypto still, that most people are familiar with things like DeFi or NFTs. And the awareness about DePIN is just starting to, word is just starting to get out about how important it is. And yet it's going to be the technology that for most people has a bigger effect on our day-to-day life, right? That is like it's
Yeah,
like the actual rails, the actual pipeline that is, allowing us to have this video call, right? The
yeah.
things that are so important to what we do on the web every day. So, what specifically are you working on when it comes to the composability? Like, is it libraries? Is it yeah, tell me more about like what you're trying to do or what you're advocating for around composability between the stacks.
Definitely. Before I jump to this one, I want to kind of comment on what you said earlier. So crypto is actually changing the world, right? So when crypto started in the year of 2012, 30, 40, I think Ethereum is around 40, 15-ish, right? So I always have this kind of blame like crypto is over centralized around the finance, right? So you see DeFi, you see like the ICO hype in the year of 2016-ish maybe.
Hmm.
And even now, I think everything's kind of like a very centralized around the finance, which is not wrong because you have to have the capital to attract the talent to build the really good stuff. But I think we're at like the turning point right now. So crypto can make some really positive impact to the world, right? For example, Solar City, right? Can you make like a P2P version or Web3 version of Solar City that will actually incentivize like a free energy for everybody? So this is not like a something I said, like a Tesla, like the inventor for this, like electricity, this guy, right? So he actually envisioned this one maybe 100 years ago, by having like those giant towers, sitting on the ground, getting like a solar powers and kind of distributed powers to neighborhood, so everybody gets a free energy to use. So this is huge, I think, and crypto, especially DePIN, has a kind of this potential to realize this vision. So this is exciting me, day and night, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just like, what is it going to take to get from where we stand to that vision?
Yeah, yeah, very
Yeah.
true. And another very impressive example I got recently is like autonomous vehicle, right? So I took a trip to Arizona actually during Thanksgiving week, and I tried like a Waymo car. Not sure if you tried, Amy. You should give it a
No,
try.
I haven't.
Wow, it's truly magic, right? You just like your phone to hold the car, like no one drives the car, but car comes to you, and very safely and fastly. You drove like a faster than I thought, deliver to like a destination, and everything
So
is like so seamless.
you
Yeah,
rode in a car that didn't have a driver.
no driver at all.
Oh, that is so scary.
It feels like scary at the beginning, but I feel like wow, that's kind of like a tomorrow, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My husband says all the time, "We're living in the future," because
yeah.
there's so many cool new things coming out in technology.
you know, Combine this one with crypto 3 or deeping, right? I'm not too surprised if there's a deeping project, let's say 3, 5 years later. It's basically around this autonomous vehicle. You can own one, right? So you can take a ride during the day, but you can rent it out when you're not use this one. You're making some passive income, maybe have like a fractional ownership of the car, with your friends, family, kind of like an investment. I don't know. It's like a real estate investment that applies to the car, right?
Mhm, yeah, it's like a rental property.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which
that's
people are doing now on Web too. There are these services, Zipcar or something where you can put your or, Turo, you can put
true.
your car up for rent basically for other people, but it will hopefully be a much improved experience on both sides using Web3 infrastructure.
Yeah, I use Turo too. Actually, I love it. I feel like those are the kind of like a Web 2 version of dipping right now, right? But I'm sure like
Mhm.
someone will kind of stand out converting or like having like a new business, basically starting from the crypto side, kind of conquer the overflows to the real world.
Mhm. Mhm. But again, it's that question of how we get there. I think that it's like a lot of us have this like really beautiful vision, this really great idea, but how we onboard, there's 5 billion people on the web, and making that change from um this walled garden web that we're living in today, where five ish companies have all of the power and control all of our data and control all of our access to each other and the kinds of information that we want to put out there,
Mhm.
to a web where we are responsible for our own access to it, that kind of like self-sovereignty issue, I think is tricky because most people don't want to take that level of responsibility. And so there's a lot of fear around, well, what happens if I lose my keys? A lot of people that have been in crypto for 5 years, more and less too, have some sort of story where they've lost access to some of their tokens or what
Mhm.
have you. And so it's going to be about solving those problems, I think, for your average user. But I also think that it's about what needs to happen to attract the Web 2 developers to build in the Web 3 space. And I think
Mhm.
that's where the issue that you're talking about of composability is a really big issue. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, so we're actually in the process, like kind of rebrand IoTex a little bit, right? So we want to call ourselves like a modularized platform for DePIN projects. Basically, we provide different modules, right? Like I mentioned about the layer one chain is one module, this option compute part is another module. So we have like a two, three modules down the way. Maybe one is around identity, exactly the same thing like you were talking about, right? How can we enable this kind of Web2 login or auth experience for Web3 users or the other way around? Um, and we have like another module we haven't launched yet, but we will perhaps do in January. It's like a device SDK, which kind of like abstract away all the hardware details, like a nitty gritty details about hardware. So make it like a very easy for builders to get started. Yeah.
Ooh,
So
that's
we're kind of
interesting.
yeah, we're kind of like a keep building like a more modules because we're talking or like working with different deeping projects, right? We're trying to learn what they want. How can we help, right? There anything like a heavy lifting that we can build?
So are you working with any of, because you're kind of, DePIN, it kind of breaks into these two categories. There's like the decentralized physical infrastructure networks, and then there's the digital resource networks, right? So on the physical side, those would be like geospatial, like things like helium, like getting onto the internet, maybe solar energy, those kinds of things where it's really location dependent. And then on the resource network side, it would be things like compute, file storage,
Yeah.
bandwidth, things that are location independent, right? That are just like digital resource, right? Okay. So it sounds like from what we've talked about so far, you guys are really focused on the physical side, right? Like the data device that goes in your pocket or your car or energy. Are you guys working with any that are on the resource side, things like compute or storage, anything like that?
Mhm. So WebStream itself is more like on the resource side itself, right? If you think about WebStream, what is WebStream? What is this off-chain verification layer? That's basically like a bunch of computers, right? It's a bunch of computers that might have a GPU card. We're having like internal testing right now. That might have like a GPU card to accelerate the calculation of zero knowledge proof, and there could be like a distributed, like could be owned by just everyday people like you, like me, like everybody else. So that's become like a digital resource. So sometimes it's kind of funny, right? So we call ourselves like a deepin project for deepin project. So like tongue twister.
That's great, though. Actually, I wanted to back up a little bit. You said you're a big fan of ZK proofs and that you have a background in cryptography. And so I just wondered if you want to say anything more about that, because I know I think that there's a lot of promise there, but I think there's also a lot of skepticism when it comes to whether or not that technology will actually prove out. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts that you'd want to share about that.
Yes, I do. I have a lot of opinions around that one as well. So for this off-chain validated proof technique, right? So we have like a few choices here, not too many. So one is hardware-based. Basically, like I said, the TE-based security element, SGX, trust zone. So they are all like hardware-based, right? So if you trust Intel, if you trust ARM, you can use hardware they provide to produce this like validated proofs, which is like a one very practical approach. A lot of kind of engineering mindset people like.
Hmm.
That's why, unfortunately not favored by the crypto people. Crypto people trust math, right? So that's why they love their knowledge proof, right? So their knowledge proof, I think it's relatively not too new, but like going rapidly, like progressing within those years. I
Hmm.
think the biggest problem right now is still like the velocity, the speed for proof generation is very slow. But I think we're getting there. We're getting there. And another technology is MPC, like this, like a multi-part like computation. That means, maybe you, me, some other guys, we three basically sitting down to compute a problem, right? Hard problem, but none of us know the detail, the answer to the problem, but we collectively somehow we solve the problem. So that is called MPC. So this one is still like within the academic region right now because it's very high complexity on the communication side. And I think the final one is fully homomorphic encryption. That's also like a black magic to everybody, right? So you can encrypt something, then you can like do compute on top of the encrypted form of the data, and still getting like the correct result, right? So I think that one is also going more into practical these years. There's some hope, like fully homomorphic encryption will become a thing in the next decade or so.
Awesome. So getting back to IoTex and WebStream, um, a lot of times projects in the crypto space will have a protocol and a company kind of structure. Is that how you guys are set up as well? And how do you have a business model? Like where does a business model live in that kind of a structure?
Yeah, so I think a lot of like a serious teams they do, right? So they do have like an entity that basically includes like the team, everybody working on strategy, ARR, while they have like a foundation, mostly handle the token side. So we are similar, very similar setup. So IoTex itself is like a decentralized project. So we have a foundation, governance, community to curate where the project's going, and we have Machine Lab basically being like the entity for the teams which produce revenue. So how the revenue is produced, that's pretty simple. I think also applies to everybody else. Is so we have some products, right? So which producing like actual incomes, for example, like the API service. So we see a lot of developers, they need like API access to our chain, to our off-chain compute part, but they don't want to, they're too lazy to set it up for themselves, right? For example, so they just purchase this API and we just make a very small cut over there. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. And is your protocol set up in the US or another country? And is your company set up in the US or in another country?
Yeah, Machine 5 is definitely like in US for sure.
Okay, but the protocol foundation is offshore somewhere.
Uh, I think so. I think everybody does that too, right? But
Yeah.
we be yeah.
Yeah, well, that brings me into kind of the regulatory questions, because there's a lot of uncertainty in that regard, especially being set up in the U.S. By the way, I love the name Machine Five for the company. That's very cool. So, do you guys have regulatory concerns? Do you have regulatory needs that you'd like to see happen? What are your thoughts in terms of being a U.S. based crypto company in the current regulatory landscape?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on this one, but like my kind of high level feeling is for new technology, there is always like a opportunity as well as a kind of threat to the current status quo, right? So the same applies to AI. You saw like all the news about AI. AI might destroy like a human being within a few years. I think crypto is actually on the same situation here. It's a very powerful technology that changes the world, but like definitely like we want to play in a regulated way for sure, right? Otherwise, you can see the crypto world too many spammers, too many, scandals here and there. So it's definitely like, I'm big advocate for having this one more regulated for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, So, what are the next steps that you have on your roadmap?
Yeah, so definitely like we're keep building like a more modules, keep onboarding DePIN projects onto those modules. We talk about DePIN scan, so we also have some other modules that gets a lot of tractions recently. So my sincere hope is, we can really make in DePIN a serious category. We have some serious investors, builders, products, users here, right? So we're not just like you said, we're not just talking about the vision. I want to see something become true, like a free transportation, free energy, right? Or maybe like you kind of monetize your healthcare data for your, I don't know, something else. So I want to see those things become true. I want to see the world become a better place for sure.
I do too. That sounds great. Um, and do you have any thoughts about what will help to motivate the mainstream use of these? Like what will be some mile markers that we will see, when we are making this transition from web 2 to web 3? It's kind of can be hard to know where you are in that transition. Like, are we close to it happening? Or, are mainstream use far away? What will we see along the path to getting there where we're like, oh, that's a good sign. We're on the way. Or, uh-oh, we we better do something to help help make sure that this doesn't, because in the early 2000s, there was this whole movement to introduce micropayments onto the web, and it didn't happen. Now, obviously, the technology wasn't there, so all of the services that were attempting to do so were proprietary. They were closed black box systems, which required you to trust them. And so that switch to trustlessness is a big part of why I believe it can work this time. But I think there's still this open question of if it will, And I just wonder if you see like what you think will help us make the transition, or what you think that transition might look like.
Yeah, usually you see like everyday people they don't understand technology, right? So they can only feel oh if the cost gets cheaper if this introduce like a new user experience. For example, I was trying like the what's it called? Google have this new product called Gemini last night. So it's like a better version of ChatGPT. So you just talk with it. It's so smart, so fast, so intelligent, so real time, and understands almost everything. And it can see, can think, can understand. Or you draw on the paper, it can understand. So I feel like those is the things, the experience improvement, right, for users, so they can perceive. They don't really understand like the underlying technology, what's it called, like a multimodality or something. I don't think everybody understands or cares about it. Same applies to crypto, right? Does everyday people understand or cares about how those crypto, DePIN, modular infra, transaction works? No, they do not. They have no interest, right? But if we can kind of cut the cost, let's say Uber, kind of per ride price by 20%, even 50%, even a free ride, right? Then people can feel, oh, crypto is changing the world. Why I'm getting like a much cheaper Uber because of ABC or crypto underneath. Similar applies to transportation, to data, to tech, to to energy, to something else. I feel like we should like kind of improve this user experience in a way. Improve the experience. I think basically have two things. One is reduce the cost, right? One is making something like a really fast or smooth to use. So think about iPhone is such a product, and also maybe something like you never seen, they never seen like ChatGPT, but like that actually worked, right? I feel like crypto, especially DePIN, is more around kind of reduce the cost side right now. Not sure if you see Helium, they have this like a 5G plan. It's cheaper compared to if you subscribe from T-Mobile or AT&T directly. So that's kind of like on this side. But I'm more curious to see, what type of new things we can do, right, with crypto, with DePIN underneath. That's my big belief. That's why we're kind of have this. This is about innovation is basically you have to have enough try and error. Then you have
Hmm.
like a real innovation.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And completely agree that that it has the ability to change the world. What are when you say that, like what do you mean by change the world? Like what would be changed, and what will those benefits be?
Uh, yeah, like I mentioned about this autonomous vehicle, right? So that's kind of like an unexperienced thing for a lot of people. So that's kind of like a change in the world. So can crypto do the same? Can DePIN do the same, right? For example, usually when you travel to a foreign country, you have to purchase like a local phone plan or data plan. That's kind of like a very um, inconvenient. But maybe
Mm,
like Helium introduced this like a 5G stuff, then you can seamlessly travel around all the countries in the world without changing the phone plan. That's kind of like a one change to the world.
mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So what you're saying is that DePIN, in terms of changing the world for users, will make the web, make the internet just much easier to use. Because right now it's like this amazing thing. A lot of people think of it as magic, that we can have this video call, that we can talk with our friends, share videos, post pictures, all of that kind of stuff. But there's still
Mm.
this incredible barrier. It can still be incredibly frustrating to
Yeah.
interact with these things. And the DPIN has the potential to make that a lot easier, a lot more enjoyable, and also to drive down the cost so that it's a lot more accessible to people. And also,
I
yeah,
think
go
drive
ahead.
down the cost is a big thing for people, right? So for example, now you have to purchase a TV, for example, if you want a TV. Maybe in the future you don't have to pay for the TV, right? Because like the data you're generating while watching the TV, interacting with the TV actually pays off itself. Same applies to all the small appliances in your family, in your home. That's also like a game changer as well, right?
Oh,
And those
100%. Especially because, there's this whole movement to like cut the cord, right? That people stopped paying for their cable bill because it was so expensive. But now to have access to the content that you want to watch, you're paying for what, 10 different streaming services. You're paying for X, Twitter, you're paying for YouTube, you're paying, you're not just even paying now for cable or for TV access like with Hulu and Netflix and all of those kinds of things. You're now also paying for all of these social media services. And so it's just like it, the more that fractures and the bigger those bills become, the more need there is for something like DePIN, where it's peer to peer and it's, you have more control over who you're paying for or who you're paying and what you're paying for, and cutting out all of that kind of bloat that's in the old system.
actually, to your point, right? So DeepIn actually enable like some new sort of economy, like data economy per se, right? Using the old world, watching this Netflix or Twitter or whatever. So you produce data, data feeds into AI, AI pays for, for your like a basic TV feed, right? Or Netflix feed. That's kind of like a new model that gets enabled. I saw some like early stage deepin projects is doing this too. So they basically open up the device like a car, like a TV, like a fridge in a way to some sort of like developers or data consumers per se, right? So data consumer could be like a research institution who wants to learn your kind of what's usually in your food, what type of food usually in your refrigerator, or like how's your sleeping pattern looks like. And also could be some pharmaceutical company as well, right? So they want to pay the bill for you, basically. Can we open up this new economy? There's a huge chance.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Have you heard the phrase that data is the new oil? That
Yeah.
the amount of money that's available in terms of the data market is huge, and it's something that most of us aren't really aware of, or at least that we haven't really connected, this sense that we have that our data is just out there and it's being used by these big companies in ways that makes us feel uncomfortable. And you hear about these data leaks and you don't know, like, what does the 23andMe data breach mean exactly? Like, who now has access to my genetic code? um, Versus, what we're talking about, where it's like, oh, if I am able to retain ownership of my data and then
Right.
even potentially engage in markets where I sell it in ways that benefit me, wow, that's wild. I think that's
Yeah.
going to take some, yeah, I struggle to understand what that, what kind of either education will become necessary, where you know, there's that famous clip from the Today Show of Katie Couric saying, "What is internet?" Right? So it's
Uh,
like that's where we are in terms of people taking ownership for their data and selling it to pharmaceutical companies or to car manufacturers or whatever. That's where we are in terms of most people like understanding that that's possible. So is the education going to go so far as to just be like, "Oh yeah, the internet is this thing that we're on all day every day, and our data is something that we are making all day every day and we understand that we own and we're going to be able to sell," or if
yeah.
it's going to become more abstract, like, yeah, I just don't know still what that's ultimately going to look like when Web3 really is at scale. Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, I can give you an analogy for that, right? So
Okay.
I have a bunch of friends who's working in the healthcare, like a pharmaceutical industry. So they told me, so like a selling the customers' data, unfortunately, is kind of status quo right now, but not into a P2P fashion. So that's why like you and me, who are outliers to this industry, we don't know. But like actual like they have a data clearing house, basically collecting like patients' information, selling to pharmaceutical. So like entire thing actually works, right? So this is like an analogy to like an old taxi industry before Uber. Like, it's not open to everybody, right?
Mhm.
So while it's happening, there is a need for data. There is a need for producing data. Uh, so, if you think about this, it's a very similar situation as a kind of taxi to Uber, right? So this will eventually open up to everybody. Like you as a patient or as a person, you can open up your data up on your well to some, data consumers to monetize your data in a way. The democracy is actually coming. It's just like on the way. I feel like.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, great. Well, where can people find you and your projects if they want
yeah.
to
So
follow
yeah,
you?
feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm mostly active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Raullen, Raullen. That's my name. So for IoTex, you can go to IoTex.io. So, it's kind of funny, right? Funny story why it's called IoTX.io. At the very beginning, when we kind of started the project, the entire the positioning is about how do we combine IoT and the blockchain all together. That's around the year 2017 year end. So that's why we call ourselves IoTX, extend of the IoT technology, right? But we have seen the kind of revolution of this IoT blockchain, all the way from 5 years ago to right now. So which is called DePIN, decentralized physical infra network. Yeah, but still, we call ourselves IoTX.io.
Okay, perfect. And
Yeah.
the final question is the name of our podcast. What kind of internet do you want?
Oh yeah, definitely like a more free, faster, right? Less spammer. Uh, yeah, it's more connected with everybody else in the world in a way, unconditionally. Right?
Mm, that's a good word for it, unconditionally.
Yeah,
Mhm,
unstoppable as well. So
definitely.
for example, right? So sorry to having maybe one thing I just thought about is um, Elon Musk has this company which have a lot of satellites. What's the name called? Like satellites providing internet services.
Starlink.
Starlink. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a really good one for deeping as well, right? So internet should be
Yeah.
kind of setting up in that way, having satellites maybe from you and me, we put onto the onto the orbit, producing the internet access for people, right? Maybe we're taking some profit to cover the investment. Yeah, how about P2P version of Starlink?
That
That's
would be
changing.
awesome.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Rollin. Well, thank you so much. This is a fantastic chat. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. Thanks for having me.